Today, I'm happy to be joined by Jordan Punn, who does NFL writing and scouting for the Texans Unfiltered podcast, also a scout for the University of British Columbia as a Texans podcast on the Believe Network. Thank you so much for joining today, Jordan. What's going on, man?
Thank you so much for having me, Manav. I've been, a long-time fan of you. We've talked a lot, and so I'm happy to, be able to join you as on your meteoric rise, man. Through this has been awesome to see. Super proud of you. So thank you for wanting to interview me. And I'm doing good, man. Super excited for the draft. It's this week. Finally, I'm so excited. The Texans have so many picks, so I'm really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the kind words, and like you said, it's really an exciting time. And I couldn't think of a better time to bring you on to my show. But the Texans do have, I think, 11 picks in this year's draft. 2 in the top 15 is what I think really stands out thanks to the Deshaun Watson trade. And I think it's also the most really unpredictable draft I've seen in a long time. We really don't know who's going to be going number one. It's not like a guaranteed number one overall pick. That it's just really unpredictable. I think, not really sure who could go where. And I really do feel that the Texans have a lot of areas they can go with, many different directions. I mean, they could really improve the secondary quite a bit. I mean, you can go with offensive line. I mean, there's just a lot of different areas here. But I wanted to ask you, what happened to Kyle Hamilton's stock? I think it went, initially he was supposed to go in the top 5 at least, or I saw that a lot of drafts had Hamilton being picked at number 3, and then all of a sudden, he's dropped all the way down. And I feel like there's a chance the Texans could grab him at number 13, what were your thoughts on Kyle Hamilton?
Yeah, I was a big fan of Kyle Hamilton. I think if you purely just watch like his film during the games, like he has a stake for the best player in the class, in my opinion. Now, why is he falling? Well, it's that 40 time that he ran a bit slower than expected. The official numbers from the NFL Combine were a 4.59, but there were some other timed runs in the 4.6, 4.7 range. And so that's kind of scaring some people, because how can you have a safety who's supposedly not fast, right? But that has been kind of the reason for his fall. And, it would be great to get him at 13, because I'm really a big believer that 40 time is kind of being overblown. I think he plays faster than he tested, really, because he's so smart. He's always one step ahead of the offense, and he always knows what's going on. He's got this great brain on him for sure. So I'm not too worried about that. I would love to get him at 13 now. That seems like a really great spot for him, and very, I think it's somewhat realistic. I would still be surprised if he's outside of the top 10, but I think that's where all the arrows are pointing leading up to the draft.
Yeah, I would love to have him at number 13. I feel like, obviously, I was a big fan of Justin. I got to meet him yesterday, so I was obviously really disappointed that he got to leave, but I would love to have Hamilton back here. Like you said, I do think that these, draft, the combine stuff, I do feel like they really overrate some of the time values that we're getting out of it. And I just feel that Hamilton, taking a look at, how smart he is on the field, just an impact overall, besides just the 40 time that we saw, I think it's much bigger than that. With him. So I would love to have him here as a Houston Texan. But I know you worked on your mock draft, but who are your 2 picks for the Texans at number 3 and number 13, assuming that no trades happen? And what would be the most realistic choices?
So what would be the most realistic choices?
Yeah.
I think, okay, so the 2 players that I mocked in my my final mock draft that'll release Thursday morning, I believe, so I'm still doing it. But the 2 guys I have slotted to the Texans right now are Evan Neal at 3 and Jordan Davis at 13. And these are 2 picks that I definitely wouldn't have been super happy with maybe a few months ago, but I feel like my process and my logic is kind of changing recently. And I think the Texans are going to want guys who, are really smart, are really good leaders, have really good work ethic, so that they can help build the culture that this team wants. On top of being talented players as well. And so Evan Neal, he can play guard as a rookie, and then depending on what they want to do with Laramie Tunsil, with Titus Howard in the future, he has that flexibility to go out and play tackle if he wants, or he can just keep him at guard. So I think they're really going to buy into, his work ethic, his character. He's been lauded as such a great leader, such a great worker, and leader by example for an Alabama program that is the best in the country. So I think they're really going to like Evan Neal. And then I think they're also really going to like Jordan Davis. I think getting 2 guys in the trenches, one in the offensive line, one in the defensive line, is the best way to go about this rebuild. Build through the trenches. That's how you get your foundation set for long-term success. So I think those would be the two guys that I would be really, really happy with.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to start with the trenches. I think it has to be offensive line and defensive line that you really have to try and build up. For me, I would really like to see the Texans get a pass rusher. That's just like what I would go with here. Because I feel like we reached the number 13 pick, I feel like all the big names at pass rush would be going, like specifically like Kayvon Thibodeaux or Trevon Walker. You have those two. And then I think Aiden Hutchinson more than likely will be a number 1 overall pick. So I would like the Texans to, at number 3, to really go after a pass rusher, whether that would be Trevon Walker or Thibodeaux. But I see where you're going with offensive line with Evan Neal. I like to see that versatility as well. I feel like there's not really a wrong choice for the Texans. Would you agree with that? I mean, that it wouldn't be wrong if they go with offensive lineman or a defensive lineman.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. And my logic is mainly aligned with you. I would kind of prefer to go get a guy like Kayvon Thibodeaux. But I guess my scenario out there was kind of like what I would predict to happen in the realistic sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they have been doing a lot of work on those top offensive linemen, and they know that there's a clear hole kind of at left guard. Like I think you're good with Tunsil left tackle, Britt center, AJ Cam right guard, Titus Howard, hopefully, fingers crossed, right tackle.
Yeah.
And then so you're trying to fill that left guard spot, right? So I think they want to get a premium guy there, and there's no one freakier than Evan Neal. But yeah, no, sorry, to answer your original question, I do think the Texans are in a very good flexible position where they have a lot of options open to them, where they can take the best player available at any one of these different positions, like you mentioned, and they can potentially trade down. I know we heard Nick Caserio say that, probably going to stick at 3, but the draft is so unpredictable. Who knows what happens when the draft actually starts? Who knows who's actually going at 1? Who knows who's actually going at 2? And so it'll depend on the board to see what will happen for us at 3. We can go in so many different ways, like you said. So I'm just excited to see it happen.
Yeah, with 1 and 2, I think it really depends, like where Detroit and Jackson will go for Houston to really make their pick. But for me, like I'm not really too big on offensive linemen at number 3. I feel like the Texans could go that way, and it's very possible they could go that way. But I think a lot of mock drafts have the Texans picking like a guy like Evan Neal. I think if the Texans didn't re-sign Laremy Tunsil, I think definitely I would have gone with offensive linemen. But I feel like, do you think that the Texans could grab offensive lineman maybe later in the draft? Maybe a guy like, I've seen some names like Trevor Penning or Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson. Would those guys like be available later in the draft for the Texans to take, or would they just want to stick with offensive linemen and just hire in the draft?
Yeah, it's tough to say. You're always going to find players later in the draft, but they might not have the ceiling that an Evan Neal or an Ike Mekwonu does at 3. And so that's kind of the trade-off you want to take. Like, are you going to take a lesser offensive lineman in the 2nd round and be okay with that? I don't know. It depends on how Nick Caserio views it, how Pep Hamilton and Lovie Smith view it. But I kind of am in agreement with you. I feel like you already have such a big asset invested into Laremy Tunsil.
Yeah.
You might have to pay Titus Howard after his if they don't pick up his 5th-year contract, his 5th-year option or whatnot, if they want to extend him, right? So that could be 2 big pieces that you might have to pay. So you might not want to invest a 3rd overall pick, very high, capital into another offensive lineman. I feel like you could get one earlier day 2, and then go pass rusher, like you said, in the 1st round. So I think, yeah, those are 2 definitely viable options that they could go.
Yeah, like I said, it's just so flexible. I'm just super excited to see where they're going to go, because like we don't know. It could be something that we didn't predict at all. So I think it's going to be super exciting draft day. But you're mentioning that Caserio, more than likely, he said that he may not trade down from number 3. But like personally, would you want him to trade down? Is that something that you think you would like to see? Because I think some fans have been considering it, considering there's like, I guess, I don't know, like no one super exceptional that you have to like really, really take at number 3. In some ways, I feel like the Texans, when they do get a really high pick, I feel like it's not a draft where there's like a, generational talent, or what you would say. But would you want to see a trade down?
Yeah, I'd be all for a trade down. I think at the end of the day, it always comes down to, which players are on the board when you're at 3, and also what the compensation is you're getting back in return. So if they can, and I would also preface this by saying the farthest I would trade down to is probably, I would say six. I feel like the top tier of prospects that you don't want to miss on, there's about six of them, like Aiden
Yeah.
Hutchinson, in no particular order, but like Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, Travon Walker, Kyle Hamilton, Evan Neal, Ikem Ekwonu, and then Sauce Gardner. So
Right.
those, I guess seven, sorry. So seven guys. That's kind of the top tier for me. And so I would want to at least get one of those guys if I was going to trade down. So that's as far as I would go, down to seven. So I could still be able to secure one of those guys, right? And I guess if you're going from 3 to, let's say, 7, like, I don't know if you can really expect another first round pick. Like, I think you would expect another high second round pick. And so if that's the deal, going from like 3 to 7, get another second round pick, I would do that for sure. I think this draft class, like you said, may not be like star studded at the top, but there's a lot of depth, especially on day 2. So that's where you want to capitalize.
Right. Like, we'll see what happens. I mean, a trade, I'd be open to it. You know, I think I do trust Nick Caserio in draft situations. I feel like he nailed all of the picks last year. I think more. I think he got good players in all the rounds pretty much. And there was a lot of talk about Malik Willis. I think specifically after his pro day, I think his stock rose up quite a bit. I mean, do you see the Texans taking Willis at number 3? Would that be something that they would even consider at all to compete with Davis Mills for the quarterback 1?
I think they will consider it because I think that's purely what type of person Nick Caserio is. He will consider every single option available. But at the end of the day, if I was betting, I would not bet on the Texans to pick a quarterback in the first round. Not so whatsoever. It would be a big shock, that's for sure. And then all these league execs are predicting that, hey, we have no idea what Caserio is doing. We have no idea. He's playing his cards close to his vest. So who knows? But I would not expect it. I feel like they have kind of propped up Mills as their guy. They've been very, they've been willing to give him praise when praise is due. And so I think, he's going to be their guy for this next upcoming season, and MLB Willis.
Yeah, I would stick with Davis Mills personally, at least for this upcoming year. I liked what I saw out of him, at least the second half of the season. I do think he has some talent. I would like to see him take that quarterback 1. But again, I think Caserio's made this really exciting for Texans fans because we don't really know at all where they could go. And if they do take Willis, like you said, it would be a big shock, as I think Willis is something like of a long-term project with that, because he wouldn't be like an instant, starter. Would you say like it would take like a year or so, right, to get him up to level?
Yeah, that's the scouting report on Malik Willis. He's a bit more of a raw kind of long-term project, like you said. Like, he's got some work to do. He's not a guy who is pro-ready like Mac Jones was for the Patriots last year. He's more along the lines of how Trey Lance looked for San Francisco and how they knew that, hey, we need to have a veteran quarterback to let Trey Lance like take some time and develop. And so that would be the ideal scenario as well for Malik Willis. So in that sense, like, maybe the Texans, like, say he falls to 13.
Yeah.
That would be a scenario where, okay, I would actually legitimately think about this, because I could spend a pick on such a high ceiling player at the best position, in the most important position in the NFL, and, give Davis Mills a 2022 season, see what he's got, let Malik Willis learn behind him. It's not the exact same thing as learning behind a veteran, but it's the same sort of idea of you have to be patient with him. So at 13, that could be an option. Would you kind of pull the trigger there, Manav, on Malik Willis at 13?
I think you made a great point about him dropping to number 13. I think that's really, really enticing right there, because like you said, this Malik definitely has a really high ceiling. He could be somebody that could be a future star quarterback. I think it really depends on who you take at number 3. And maybe if you take offensive linemen, I don't know, would you want to consider taking those? But I think it's really interesting. Who knows? Honestly, I feel like that's really enticing. I feel like I might honestly pull the trigger on that one, especially if he's there at 13, because there's Davis Mills is a good quarterback, but it's not like he's super electrifying on the field. I feel like Willis kind of has that. I don't know. It just seems like he has that kind of potential. And who knows if the Texans could really, take that ability. And I feel like some people are also hesitant on pulling the trigger on Kayvon Thibodeau. I feel like they've been questions. People have questions about his motor, maybe his personality. But I think he could be someone that really could be electric for this team. A big difference maker. I think he's really fast. I think he really lit it up in the combine. He had a really great performance there. So what were your thoughts on him specifically?
Yeah, so I love Kayvon Thibodeau, love him as a player, and I think he's a very driven person as well. I think when you look to his film, like I see no motor efforts, or sorry, no motor concerns, no effort concerns, whatever. Like he will always chase the quarterback around the field, outside of the pocket. I like that about him. I think he's a passionate player on the field for sure. And I think he has one of the highest ceilings in this class in terms of like a non-quarterback, right?
Yeah.
As a pass rusher, those are basically the most important positions are, the quarterback, the guy who gets after the quarterback, and the guy who protects the quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the guy who gets after the quarterback, that's Kayvon Thibodeau. And that's a role that we absolutely need opposite John Grenard. So I would love him at 3. I'd be very happy with that. I do think like the concerns that you mentioned are a bit overblown. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's a person in terms of, I spoke to the on-field concerns and then the off-field concerns in terms of, work ethic and whatnot. Like I think he's a very well-spoken individual and a business-oriented individual and a very smart individual. And so that can kind of come off as, oh, he's cocky. He doesn't need to put the work in. He's not going to, do whatever is necessary. But I think that's kind of the wrong read on him. In my opinion, I think because of how business-driven he is, it shows that, he has the determination. He's a self-starter. He wants to put the work in to succeed. And he just knows that his future in football will not last him forever, and he needs to prepare himself for the life after football. And so that's why he's so business oriented. So I think honestly he's just a really smart guy, and people are overthinking it.
Yeah, I would honestly, my pick at number 3 for the Texans is Thibodeau. I just really want a pass rusher at 3 because like I said before, I'm just not sure if they're going to be available later on in the draft. I feel like there's depth in offensive line, there's depth in receivers or running backs or, even secondary. I can see those guys being taken later on in the draft, but I think like a big pass rusher, I want to see the Texans take him at 3. That would be my choice. And like you said, I do think in the draft and in combines, I feel like a lot of scouts or a lot of people just like overblow stuff. They make things seem like a big deal when maybe it's really not that big of a deal. So yeah, I would love him there at number 3. But who do you think would be a better fit for the Texans scheme wise? Would it be Travon Walker or would it be Thibodeau? Because I feel like people want Walker's versatility as well because now he's jumped up all the way to 1 or 2 in many different mock drafts.
Yeah, I would definitely say Kayvon Thibodeau is the better fit for the Texans. I think
Okay.
what they need is, a pure 4-3 defensive end who can rush from his hand with his hand in the dirt, and use his athleticism really as the main, weapon in his toolkit. Like we're trying to essentially replace Jacob Martin and what Jacob Martin was. And Jacob Martin was known for his speed, his athleticism, his get off the edge. And that's what Kayvon Thibodeau is, but just cranked up to 100. Right.
Yeah.
So I think he would be a lot better. Whereas, like you said, Travon Walker, a lot of his potential that people see is the versatility to play on the edge, but also play inside. And his versatility fits a lot better in a 3-4 defense, and mainly on the inside. So that's kind of not exactly what we need with Lovie Smith's defense. So I'm oh my gosh, I can't speak, but I'm in the same boat as you, Manav. I'd like Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah, we want to stick with Lovey's scheme. I think the Tampa 2-4-3 is what we want. Obviously, with him being the head coach, I think that's what Caserio is really going to be considering here in this draft. What fits best for this defense? But who do you have really the Texans taking in the second round with that? I think that 37th overall pick. I mean, I feel like Ojabo could be available.
Yep.
Or like who would you pick at number 37?
Yeah, it definitely all depends on, as you mentioned before, kind of who you take at 3 and then 13, of course. So we'll go in 2 different directions. We'll go with the first direction that I kind of predicted is that if they go O-line at 3,
Yeah.
and then maybe, like you said, there's not a pass rusher at 13, then yeah, let's go get David Ojabo at 37. I think he's got crazy high upside because of how new he is to the sport, how young he is. He's only been really playing for a year and a half. He's a former soccer player from Scotland. And so he's got really high upside. You're going to have to medical redshirt him his first rookie year, but that's okay because we're not trying to compete our first year or this upcoming year anyways. If you want another edge rusher in the second round, there's a guy named Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State. I really like him. So that would be the first scenario. Let's say they go Evan Neal at 3, and then maybe it's a corner or a wide receiver at 13, and then an edge at 37.
Yeah.
And then let's go with your scenario, which I also really love, is going edge rusher at 3. So that's be Kayvon. And then let's imagine, I don't know, maybe a corner or wide receiver again at 13 just to keep it consistent. Then at 37, I would definitely want to go get one of those offensive linemen that you mentioned. Like there will be some offensive linemen later in the second round. And so two of my favorites are Sean Ryan out of UCLA. He played left tackle, but he doesn't really have the longest arms. And so a lot of people want to slide him into guard. I think he can play left guard really well.
Mhm.
Good run blocker, good pass protector, just a well-rounded player. Who else? Tyler Smith out of Tulsa is another guy. A lot of people like. He's really nasty, really physical, would give us that kind of like mauling mentality in the trenches that we need, especially to improve our run blocking. So those would be two offensive linemen and two edges in the second round.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown there, Jordan. You know, I feel like if the Texans do take offensive linemen, I feel like it should be some guys inside, like at the guards, because I feel like we are set at tackle. I really want Titus Howard to stay in one place, like for once. I mean, he just keeps moving all over the place, and it'd be better if he just sticks at right tackle and you have Laramie at left. I would like guards in the inside to really help with the run blocking because Texans had the worst run offense last year, so we really need to improve that really well. And you know, going to corners, more than likely, Ahmad Gardner, he's not going to be available at number 13. He's really going to be going high. Would you say he would be worth using the number 3 pick on Sauce Gardner or even like Derek Stingley? Like, would you want to? Do you think that would be a good option?
Yeah, I definitely think Ahmad Gardner would be a good option. He is my cornerback one. I loved his film. I thought that, the stats, the film, the measurables, the athletic testing, like he's checked every single box on the list in terms of looking at him from like an evaluator's perspective, a scout's perspective. I think he can be that cornerback one, the press man heavy guy, or he can play some zone and kind of be that JC Jackson, that Stephon Gilmore, that Nick Caserio has had so much success with in the past. So I would love him at 3. I'd be very happy with that. He's another one of those guys where, like we've been saying, like you can go in so many of these different options and still be happy. As for Derek Stingley, the other name you mentioned, cornerback out of LSU, I would be a little bit more hesitant at 3. That would be one of the picks where I'd be like, I just don't know because there are a lot more risks involved with him. I think he's a riskier prospect than Ahmad Gardner because of his production kind of declining every single year. He had a great year in 2019 as a freshman, but in 2020 was bad and he dealt with some injuries. 2021 was even worse and he dealt with more injuries. And so how can I warrant taking a player like Derek Stingley over a guy like Ahmad Gardner, who Derek Stingley has been kind of downhill, whereas Ahmad Gardner has only been uphill in terms of like his trajectory. So there's the injury concerns. There's the bad tackling with Derek Stingley. And so for me, I would be a little bit more hesitant with Stingley at 3.
Yeah, I would be happy with corner as well. But I feel like in just what I think for the Texans in the draft, like I said, I would want edge rusher at 3. And I feel like Kyle Hamilton is my guy at number 13. That's who I feel like they can go with, defensive line, then improve the secondary. And then, because like I said before, I think that there's depth in the offensive kind of talent in this draft, like offensive lineman or receiver or running back. I feel like you can take those guys later on. So I would really build that defense. But, it's really versatile. They can go wherever they want. And I think Gardner would be somebody I would prefer over a guy like Stingley. And I think that would be good. But I mean, would you be willing to take a receiver at 13, like a guy like Jameson Williams or, maybe Drake London or any of those guys? Would you want them at 13 or would you stick to like a defense and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think I would prefer some other defenders. Kyle Hamilton, like you mentioned. I think Jordan Davis is really, really intriguing me a lot right now. But at the end of the day, like if they took a wide receiver, I'd still be happy with it. I think it's still a position that, eventually we'll need that more prominently after Brandon Cook's extension and Nico Collins. I'm super high on Nico Collins, but we'll admit like he maybe didn't have the rookie season that we all expected and wanted him to have, but I think he can bounce back, so that's fine. In terms of the wide receivers, I would love them to get Treylon Burks or Jameson Williams. I think those two guys fit really well what we want to do on offense, what Pep Hamilton wants to do on offense, and they're just athletic freaks. And I think we need more of that on this team for sure. So I'd be fine with wide receiver as well.
Okay, what about Chris Olave? Would you want them to take? Are you high on him as well?
I'm actually not as high on Chris Olave as the consensus is.
Okay.
I believe I have a second round grade on him, whereas most people have him in the first round, and even some people have him as the first wide receiver, the best one. I just think he profiles someone as better who is more of a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1. I don't really see him being that star guy like a Devontae Adams, like a DeAndre Hopkins. You know what I mean? I think he's a really good like basically a really good Robin to a Batman, basically a really good like sidekick, if that makes sense. So I would rather take one of the other guys who I think does profile as a wide receiver 1, like Jameson Williams, like Treylon Burks, like Drake London, Garrett Wilson, etc.
Yeah, look, Brandon Cooks, I'm happy that he's staying. And I think Nico Collins is really, I think he has a bright future here. But running backs, I think is something that the Texans need to consider as well. I think Rex Burkhead, I feel like he's somebody that is like more like a running back too. But people these days don't want to take running backs too high. I think because of injury concerns or how long they can play. But I feel like the Texans should really try and get somebody like a Brees Hall, maybe using their second round pick. Do you think a guy like him would be available in the third round?
I think he tested too well and he's too productive to fall to the third round. It's very
Okay.
possible because we do draft kind of early in the third round.
Mhm.
And the draft is unpredictable, but I wouldn't put my money on it. I think he'll probably be selected in the mid second, maybe late second. What my strategy would be, unless Kenneth Walker is somehow there
Yeah.
at 68, which I don't think he will, I would kind of wait a little bit to take a running back. I think I would take it early day 3, so I'd be like with our round 4 pick.
Yeah.
Just because this running back class is not super great this year, and I think it's more deep than it is like top heavy. And
Mm.
so I think there's a lot of day 3 guys who kind of fit what we want to do on offense a bit better in terms of what Pep Hamilton wants to do with his power run game. And so I would look at guys like Damian Pierce out of Florida. Who else? Zamir White out of Georgia. James Cook out of Georgia as well. Those are the guys I kind of target late round 3, early round 4.
Yeah, I would definitely want the Texans to draft a running back in this year's draft, because of how bad it was last year, the running game. We do need some explosiveness in that department. It would really be awesome to have somebody like that. And hopefully they'll be able to get somebody like that in the fourth round or maybe early third. We'll see what happens. But who do you have going top 2? I mean, would it be Travon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson? Would it be those two?
I think what I put in my mock draft, oh gosh, what did I put? I think I put Aiden Hutchinson at, no, I put Ike Mekwonu
Yeah.
to the Jaguars actually. I know the Jaguars are really indecisive right now. Trent Baalke wants Travon Walker. Their defensive coordinator, Mike Caldwell, apparently wants Aiden Hutchinson. And then their head coach, Doug Peterson, wants Ike Mekwonu. And so my logic of it was, you just hired Doug Peterson. You kind of have to give him a little bit of say in this decision, I feel like. And the smartest thing is really to build around Trevor Lawrence. And so I'm sure the Jags would have loved to trade down from this pick and then take an offensive lineman. But, your best asset right now is Trevor Lawrence. You got to give him all the help he can get. So give him Ike Mekwonu there. And then, I went Aiden Hutchinson at 2 for the Lions. I feel like that's a no-brainer. It makes too much sense
Yeah.
if he's there for them.
Yeah, I feel like the Jaguars, I don't know if they really do have to take an edge rusher at number 1. I feel like they can definitely take offensive linemen, or that's Ekwano, or I mean, even Evan Neal. Do you think he could be at number 1 as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure. It seems like they kind of have their tackles set with Cam Robinson at left tackle and Juwan Taylor at right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Neal is a bit better as a tackle than a guard, whereas Ekwonu is a bit better as a guard than a tackle, which is the only reason why I went Ekwonu. And apparently Doug Peterson loves Ekwonu, so that's why. But I could also see Evan Neal, but I would maybe say it's just a little bit less likely.
Yeah, I think Ekwonu is somebody that I would definitely look out for as number 1. I mean, do you think the Texans could get Aiden Hutchinson number 3? Do you foresee that? I don't know if the Lions would be like willing to not take him, because if he's there at number 2, like I feel like he's gone more than likely.
Yeah, more than likely. I think there's a potential scenario where either the Lions fall in love with Malik Willis or they get like a Godfather offer and they trade down so another team can trade up for Malik Willis. I think that would be what would need to happen for us to get Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, I would definitely love him. That's kind of like, I don't know, it'd be kind of like a dream to get him, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be amazing. And I want to hear your thoughts on, I think this is my last question for you, but what are your thoughts on a guy like Kenny Pickett, like those other quarterbacks in that draft? Because I feel like, they're not going to be going really high this year. What are your thoughts on some of the other quarterbacks?
Yeah, in terms of the other quarterbacks, so the way I have them ranked, I have Matt Corral, quarterback 1, Malik Willis, quarterback 2, Kenny Pickett, quarterback 3, Carson Strong, quarterback 4, and then Desmond Ridder, quarterback 5. So that's my order. there's really not many first round guys. Like I don't think Kenny Pickett, like you mentioned, is really a first round guy. I
Yeah.
think he has so much college experience, and there's somewhat of a high floor there, but he's also some of his like I would say he seems like a high floor guy, but he's not actually that high of a floor. Like I don't think he's as good as the Mac Jones. I don't think he's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
that ready to kind
Yeah.
of give like a comparison. So I wouldn't take him if I was the Texans, even if he's there in the second round. I just this the rest of this quarterback class is not that strong, and like
Yeah.
statistically, like someone is gonna be good. We just don't
Yeah.
really know who it's gonna be, but statistically, like there has to be at least one or two good quarterbacks every single year. So, but my money would kind of be on Matt Corral if it's one person. I'm kind of really bought into him as a competitor, as a leader, as a worker. I think there's no one who improved more from 2020 to 2021 than Matt Corral. But then he and the rest of his Ole Miss offense dealt with a lot of injuries, and so his stats don't look too good. And halfway through the season, he was playing injured, so it just didn't look too good. But I'm a big believer in him and his upward trajectory and his potential. So I would think about him at 37. I don't know if I would pull the trigger. It depends how the board would look. But yeah, those are kind of my overall quarterback thoughts.
Yeah, that's great analysis there. Thank you so much for the time, Jordan. It was great talking, and I'm really excited to see your mock draft. Really excited for the draft as well. I'm going to be posting this. I'm going to be posting it soon, but I appreciate the time, and thank you so much. Hope to have you on some other time as well, man.
Definitely, Manal. Thank you so much for having me once again. I really appreciate you, dude. I'm super happy for you, man. You're just gonna keep rising and keep being a star, dude.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words, man. You have a good rest of your day, Jordan, man. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
You too. You
Yeah.
too.